Hey guys, in this video today we're going to look at how we can use readiness and liveness probes in Kubernetes, in this case EKS, alongside BWCE. And so exactly how this works, well, if you have a Business Works Container Edition project, you don't have to do anything. This is already built in within Studio, within the project that's already created. Essentially, we expose some sort of value or a get on port 7777. That's always being sent out, basically like a ping, that will let us essentially attach to that and record and see, okay, is our service or is our application active? So there's nothing you need to do on the Business Works Container Edition side. It's just a matter if you build the app, it's already built in, so you don't worry about that. Exactly how this works is if you actually look up the documentation in Kubernetes, they have liveness and readiness probes that are built in within the platform itself. Essentially, a liveness probe is so it just knows when to restart a container. So if something's wrong, if it isn't restarting fast enough or something, then you could always set a liveness probe that says, okay, if you're unable to start in 60 seconds, restart, because there might be an error. And then a readiness probe is to make sure that your container is actually accepting traffic. So if you deploy something and something's wrong or it's not configuring correctly or something like that, and traffic isn't able to be run through, and you will get an error and say, okay, traffic isn't available for this. But if it is, then you should be good to go. If you want to read a little bit more about this, I just check documentation, and there's a lot of different types of probes. So either HTTP or you can use TCP. If you just scroll down here, and there's different configurations that you can use as well. So I suggest you just look at that. And then from the BusinessWorks side, exactly how you set this up is that we basically just use an HTTP probe. Like I said earlier, there's a path that's already created within every single BWC project, and it's /_ping, and then it's always running on port 7777. So if this is in the documentation for BWCE, how to set it up, you don't have to follow this exactly, but I'll just walk through what I've done and possibly what you can do for your app as well. So right now, I don't have an app running, so I'm going to deploy an application and get that running as well. And so this is the manifest file that I'll be using to deploy my app. Just to walk through it, it's just a simple app that I built in BWCE. It's going to take a load balancer on port 8080 so that I have an external endpoint, and it's going to take this image that I created. I already pushed that up. Any Business Works Container Edition project. We don't have to worry about these environment variables, but if you're interested in config maps, there's a video on that already, so feel free to check that out. And then down here, this is where I actually configured the liveness and the readiness probe. So what I do is that I could either do it this way, where I define a port name, or essentially a port name with a container port and a host port, and then define that port name as the port for the probe for both of these. Or what I can do is, I already know that it's on port 7777. I don't have to worry about anything else. So I can just define that as a container port. And then under the probes, I just define port 7777, 777. So it's open. And I just put the path for both of them ping. And this is also very important to put an initial delay, where if you don't put an initial delay, you might see errors or warnings that come up. Because what will happen is that as soon as that is deployed, if it isn't available right away, it's going to give you an error because there's no delay. So I just put this for the liveness 30 seconds, readiness 60 seconds. This can change depending on how complex your application is. So if it's something a lot more complex that needs a lot more things to actually get started with, then I would suggest putting this longer. If it's something that's like hello world, you could probably get away with putting it shorter. I just go with this just because I know that this works, and just makes it very easy to use. So what I have in my folder here is I have the manifest file, and then if I already have my image already, it's already deployed up, so it's just a matter of deploying my application. So kubectl, and then create f manifest sample YAML. Essentially, it's going to take the manifest file just like a normal Kubernetes deployment. It's going to create my service, my replication controller, and that will also create my pod as well. And so this will take about because we are about a minute, because we set our initial delay at 60 seconds. So it's going to take 60 seconds to just make sure that's all good to go. But if we refresh here, and it looks like it wants refresh it again, you'll see that it's starting up. And once it's starting up, we'll just have to wait a little bit to actually see that. So we'll just give that 1 minute. So let's refresh this. Okay, and then we can check this external endpoint out. Because it's a REST service, I need the Swagger UI. If you got using that /Swagger to the end, and we should see what our response is. And so it gives me a response, whatever I put there. And if you wanted to make sure that whatever you put in or for your probes is running or ran correctly, is if you go to your pods and then you go to your events, you can do this with the CLI or the web UI. If you see something here that says connection refused or something like that, then that means that it wasn't successful in actually reaching what your whatever probe port you decided to use. And that could be because of a timeout, because you didn't set an initial delay that's long enough, or because maybe you didn't open up port 7777. So it's just a few things to keep in mind if you see an error with that. But if you don't see anything, then everything should be good to go. And then your application now, if there's anything wrong with it, there's a probe for both the readiness and the liveness that's actually running. So, and this is true for EKS and also for any other type of flavor of Kubernetes. So, thank you.